Welcome to Civilian Carry Radio, a proud member of the Firearms Radio Network. This show is brought to you by our sponsors tonight, Big Tex Outdoors and FPF Training. Big Tex Outdoors' main focus is high-quality tactical EDC gear. They offer 100% risk-free shopping. That means if you change your mind for any reason, they will refund the full purchase price, shipping costs, and pay for the return shipping. So total risk-free shopping, folks. On top of that, most of their orders ship for 24 hours or less. Some of their items ship for as little as $1.99. They're an FFL Class 3 SOT, so they sell suppressors, SBRs, and other NFA items. Check out their website, bigtexoutdoors.com. Please use the code CCRadio for a 15% discount at checkout. And remember, folks, risk-free shopping. FPF Training is for citizens seeking to become capable self-defenders who require that their mindset be reinforced with the knowledge to enable informed decisions and skills necessary to undertake decisive action while under stress. To fulfill this requirement, our sponsor, FPF Training, offers Concealed and Carry Advanced Skills and Tactics. This consists of extensive coursework, practical application, and range time that is focused on a host of skills designed to enable ordinary people to prepare themselves for the armed lifestyle and criminal violence. FPF Training is based in Culpeper, Virginia, and is traveling to ranges around the country. To attend a course or to host a class, go to fpftraining.com. And folks, please stay tuned after this live broadcast for a video feature from FPF Training entitled FPF Training's Concealed Advanced Skills and Tactics. Our goal and focus of this podcast, folks, is to spread our message to everyday people, the importance of the Second Amendment, firearm safety, education, training, and mindset. Remember, you and only you are responsible for your safety and protection and of your loved ones. Our mission statement: gun ownership is your right and safety education your responsibility. I'm your host, Baraka James, and tonight our other co-host, Tatiana, is off. So with me also, as always, is our brother, Alan Sams. Good evening, Alan. How are you?
Great. How's it going?
All is well, brother. We have actually a couple of things going on, folks. But before we get to that, let's go to our first guest co-host tonight. That's Mr. Lee Weems. Good evening, Lee. How are you?
Good evening, Baraka.
All right. Glad to have you, brother. And our second guest co-host is actually Brian Hill. But Brian is currently having internet connection problems. He has Comcast and their internet service is down, so he will be joining us as soon as he possibly can. Folks, we are listener-funded radio, and you, the listeners and viewers, make this program possible. You can contribute to the show via Patreon for as little as $1 per episode or as much as you like by going to patreon.com/CC Radio or clicking the link here in our show notes. A huge shout out to our $10 per show Patreon pledges, Mark B. and Young Pei Chang. Our $5 per show Patreon pledges, Christopher D., Rob J., CJ, James W., Russ A., Ira S., Rob C., Michael G., Eric B., Mark E., ATI Guns, Pat B., John W., On-Site Firearms, and Scott D. We want to say a huge thank you to the people who currently pledge through Patreon. Your support helps contribute to the goal of educating people on the Second Amendment, firearm safety, education, training, and mindset. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and guests and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio, Civilian Carry Radio, and or their employees. Viewer discretion is advised, especially on live shows. Tonight, we welcome back Mr. Claude Werner. He's a U.S. Army vet, a.k.a. the Tactical Professor, who was originally on our episode number 39, and we have the link here on our YouTube notes. Currently, Claude is also having internet problems. We had them briefly, but looks like they have an internet outage in their area, so we're waiting for both Brian and Claude to bring their internet back, but they'll be joining us shortly. They have reassured us as fast as Comcast can bring them back up. So tonight's topic that we're going to be discussing with Claude is how to effectively practice on an indoor range. Claude's bio: Claude, the Tactical Professor. His background combines extensive work in the military, self-defense training, white-collar financial services communities. This eclectic experience gives him a view of self-defense equipment and techniques that is more attuned to the needs of people with median lifestyles than some segments of the industry. His background: he's a retired Army captain with 10-year service in special operations, market research director for 3 commercial real estate firms, national director in real estate research at a Big 4 accounting firm, match director, International Defensive Pistol Association Georgia Championship years 2000, 2001, 2002, and IDPA area coordinator for Georgia and Alabama. IDPA classifications are Master, Stock Service Revolver, Stock Service Pistol, Enhanced Service Pistol, Custom Defense Pistol, numerous wins in pistol competitions. He's also an NRA certified instructor for basic pistol, rifle, and shotgun, personal protection in the home, refuse to be a victim, and home safety. He's the former chief instructor at the Elite Rogers School. We have all of his links, including his main website, his Facebook, and his Instagram, all in our show notes. So, folks, until we can get those guys back, unfortunately, like I said, because of internet problems, we'd like everyone to we're going to start off with a discussion about something I'm sure many of you all saw this week that was very disturbing. And if you didn't see it, make sure that you see it. We'll put the video link in the show notes. There was a very disturbing viral video that went around this week that happened in Minnesota. There was 3 different incidents, but the one that shook up people the most was the specific one where there was a man waiting outside of a stadium, sitting there around a bunch of teens. He pulls out his phone and they set him up from the beginning. Basically, he was sitting there around 5 or 6 different teens, and he brings out his phone, and then 2 more come up, then another one comes up, and they start beating him profusely, hurting him really badly, knocking him out, pulling off his pants, robbing him. They rode a bike over him. They did a bunch of bad things to him. And we wanted to talk about that because I posted it on our main page on Facebook, and I entitled it because I want people to pay attention. It's hard to watch, but you need to watch it to understand a few things, to dispel some of the things that law-abiding citizens that we try to get through have no training, try to get through their heads, that are truths that we have proven over and over on our show through subject matter experts. 1, the police will never get there in time. That happened in less than 3 minutes, and that man was devastatingly hurt. 2, people are always like, oh, I'll just talk my way out. You can't talk your way out when you have 20 teens pounding down on you. 3, I'll outrun them. They're teenagers. You're not going to outrun them. There's a pack of 15 to 20 of them. There's no way you're going to get away. So check out our show notes for that link, or go to our Facebook page and look at that. It's right under tonight's advertisement, and it'll show you the goings on of that. And the police chief in that area cited that they are currently 30 police officers short, and these attacks have been occurring between midnight on. So between like midnight to whenever, it's been going on and has been continuing to go on because there's lack of police officers to patrol the area. And apparently, we were talking in the pre-show, and Lee was saying this is a nationwide thing right now. So Lee, why don't you speak a little more to that, if you don't mind, brother?
First thing I want to stress that I always have to do when I discuss law enforcement is that there is no single entity of law enforcement in the United States. There are 18,000 plus law enforcement agencies in the U.S. 17,984 of them are under state and local control. That's not a made-up number. That's from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So 17,984 are under local control. And so that's every city, every county, etc., having their own agencies, or most having their own. There's no single answer to everything. There's no one set of procedures that encompasses everything other than the Constitution, etc. So there's 18,000 different ways of doing things that may all be right, or some of them may be wrong. But what we are seeing nationwide is a shortage in qualified candidates for open positions. I know you quoted 30 positions down for this agency. The neighboring agency to the north of me is down probably 40 or 50 officers, I think, at last count. That's a 200 and something man agency. And it's not just the big cities and the big areas. It's spread out into local agencies as well. My sheriff's office is at full staff, but there's one city within our county that is at 50% strength right now. Now, some of that has to do with some issues at the top that they had to resolve. They hired a new chief who's trying to get things fixed, and they're in the process of hiring 3 people to get them back up to full strength. But lots and lots and lots of agencies across the United States are down significantly in manpower, and that is dramatically increasing the response time to emergency calls for service. And think about it, you're on your own. The next time you go to a multi-story building, I want you to stand in the parking lot of that building get out your stopwatch or on your phone, get your timer going. Start your stopwatch and briskly go to the top floor as fast as you can get up there. See how much that time was. Okay, that's the response time if the cop was in the parking lot and you were on the top floor.
And that was 3 minutes in
Yeah.
that video. Think
about that. The cops, if someone dialed 911 the instant that incident started, they got to get there. And then they got to get there with enough numbers to deal with a situation like that. Now, probably the sirens blaring, the car sliding to a stop, the uniform showing up, probably most of that crowd's going to run off. But they might not. They might not. You're seeing trends up in New York City and everything where the crowds are turning on the response.
Mm-hmm.
You are very much on your own. Very much so. I see we got our two guests here tonight.
Yeah. So
and the esteemed Claude Werner.
Yeah. So Claude and Brian, we were discussing that video that we were talking about earlier, and Lee was going into the shortage of police kind of across the nation, but in what he knew about it. But the one thing that I really noticed about that video, there was nothing stolen. They didn't take anything from that guy. They did that just out of sheer brutality. And they were taking his clothes off. They were beating with a belt, riding bikes over him, practicing wrestling moves on him, just jumping down like WWF type wrestling moves. This wasn't that wasn't for any reason. Like there was no goal to that other than, hey, there's a dude, let's beat him up. So
and only one person in the crowd tried to stop him.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Brian?
Hey, it's me. I'm on.
Well, hold on. I want to ask Brian something specific. Brian, one of the commentary I saw on one of the discussion boards about that video was one of the there's an element I've noticed over the last 40 years that I've been practicing martial arts, and I'm nowhere near at your level, but there's an element in the community that says, don't need to carry a weapon. I am the weapon. And some of those people actually believe that in that situation that they would have been able to fight off 20 kids. Can you speak to some of that and the mindset behind, the different ways that you could have either rectified that, remedied, or if you even think that was feasible with your vast experience in martial arts, Brian?
Yeah, there was a lot of things going on there. He was in, a seated position to get up when he got hit. He got hit from the side. It's pretty hard to fight even two people at once. We do it frequently in class, and we find it to be really a problem. 3 people seems to be an absolute limit. And once you get on the ground, it gets even harder. Now, some skills would help him, if he could cage up and keep his hands up, if he can, get on his back and keep his feet up. But it's a limited amount of time. Any skill he had in striking or grappling would be to get him out of that situation as fast as he could to run away. We've seen a couple videos where somebody has defended themselves successfully against multiple opponents, but usually it's a very tentative group of attackers. And as soon as he stood up, it seemed like the group was very much on him and ready to engage him. If it was me, I think there's, as much as I could, I'd be doing everything I could to get away. And that's something we don't teach as much in martial art, is how to get away from things. On his back, covering up, turtling up. We're really just minimizing the violence at that point and the damage that we're taking in. So that's a pretty tough situation. I think having some sort of tools with you is very useful in that point. You've got a lot of problems around you all at once. And his fitness level compared to those young men was very different. You're going to get tired quick with multiple opponents, and that's something to really think about. If you can fight for 20 or 30 seconds against one guy, when you're fighting against 2 or 3, your oxygen goes really quick, and you get really tired with it. So it's great to have the martial arts tools, but I think you need to carry something with you, a less lethal like OC, but also, I carry a firearm every day, and I've been training for 40 years. So it tells you about the level of commitment to having multiple disciplinary training in your approach to this.
Not being in the phone helps.
Yeah.
That guy sit down.
Yeah.
In between a bunch of hyenas, whether he knew it or not, and got immediately in his phone. So, Claude, we've got a question in the chat is from John Van Sweringen, and he wants to know if I think it was him. Yeah, is a straight up crowd beatdown an exception to your often cited Proverbs 26:17?
Say that one again.
John Van Sweringen wants to know, is a crowd beatdown like that, is that an exception to your often cited Proverbs 26:17? 26.
Oh, do not interfere. Yes, yes. So, yeah, taking the dog by the ears.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good question. You know, my initial impression, and you know, I was not there, so it's hard to say sometimes what you will and won't do. But my initial impression would be to just hose everybody down with OC and then run like hell. You know, it's like I'll let the police, you know, sort this out. But I'd have to say in that particular case, I'd be really hard pressed to just say that guy's just out of luck, and I'm going to let him have it. You know, especially if I could get, you know, and this is a military aspect of it. If I can get behind them and let them have the weapon, even if it's you know, a less lethal or non-lethal weapon, if I can get behind them and let a bunch of them have it and then just run like hell, that's probably, I think, the best way that I would handle that. So maybe that's not 26:17, but that's my version of applying 26:17 to that particular situation.
Yeah, and you know, that's another thing Barack and I were talking about when we first saw this video, is the whole runaway thing. You know, those were long, lanky, young kids, like guys. I'm wondering how many people could run. That got us into the whole discussion was, you know, you think that you all these things. Well, can you outrun at whatever age you are? Like me, 46, Barack, 46. You know, everybody, however, can you outrun a 22-year-old long, slim, athletic kid? And the other thing was that led us into, and this is a good question for you, is you know, does your training change as you get older? And if you ever do, it takes us guys especially a long time to one day admit, you know what, if I met 26-year-old me, he'd probably beat my tail. You know, so you have to, at some point, you got to change I guess that you got to change the training from what you would have done when you're, you know, 40s, 50s to when you're 60, 70. I mean, how does that change? And are you necessarily?
Well, I'm not sure it changes the training that you're going to do, other than to say, well, there's some things I used to be able to do that I can't do now,
right,
especially in the physical sense. And I think a lot of people are starting to address that. Brian and I were talking about it with what they can and can't see in the sights. You know, that red dots are getting, as on carry guns, are starting to get to be more prevalent, and it's among older guys who just can't see the sights. But one of the things that I think is very key in that equation, and I've written some articles about this, is that it's not only us, but the people that we're with. You know, my dad was a bad dude. I mean, a wonderful man, but not somebody to be trifled with. But one time I flew out to Phoenix to see him, and my brother wheeled him up to the gate. This tells you how long ago it was. My brother wheeled him up to the gate to meet me in a wheelchair. And at that very moment, I realized my life had changed, because whereas we might have, and my dad was a big one for not getting involved and to extricate yourself from a bad situation as soon as possible, despite his background. But he just didn't have that possibility anymore. I mean, he had to use a walker in those years, and as he got older, he had to use a walker all the time. So at that point, you got to say, well, run away, for me as his son, even though I could run away, I can't run away when he's with me.
Right.
You know, and so that means that, you know, especially if it doesn't even have to be 20, but if it's multiple attackers, that means weapons are going to get involved much earlier in the deal than they would have before that time. And I think that's an important consideration that people do need to address, you know, both in terms of what they're physically capable of doing. You know, I feel very fortunate that I had a lot of training when I was younger just about how to make contact with the ground. You know, I haven't been in a fight in many years, but I've fallen down a lot. You know, in you know, ice storms or tripping on my back porch. I remember I fell on the concrete, but because I knew how to make contact with the ground, I was not injured in those cases. But does that mean I can practice it that much anymore, especially on concrete?
Mhm.
No, I can't. So, you know, there are some adaptations we're going to have to make as we get older. You know, I turned 65 the end of this month. And I just realized, well, there's some things I can do and some things I can't. I can still walk a lot, but my running days are over. I just can't do it. So, and in terms of what we train, you know, we're going to have to think about things like, what distance can I make the shot if I can't really see the sights too well? You know, that there are things like that, and that's where I think sometimes we need to really get into having a benchmark of what our performance is capable of doing, so that when we realize, well, you know, I used to be able to hit the 10 ring pretty easily at 10 yards, and anymore I'm lucky if I hit the 7 ring. So that means, you know, I may have to change some of my tactics, and especially if I was in some situation where I had to shoot around my family members, whereas, you know, at an earlier point I might have said, oh yeah, I can take that shot, no problem. I might have to say, well, in this case, I've got to close until I know that I'm certain I can make that shot without injuring my family member. So that's also something we need to think about in that, you know, context.
Claude, you talked about the example of, you know, you couldn't run away from your father, and leave him. Well, there's a flip side to that too. Parents with young children. You might not have the opportunity. You know, you got two small children. I guess you pick which one's going to take care of you when you're 96 and in a wheelchair, and you say
how young you are.
Yeah.
If you can have more, you know.
Yeah, but if you got to grab a child on each arm, how are you going to run away from that too?
Yeah, exactly. That's the same set of circumstances. It's just the flip side of the coin, that as much as we would like to extricate ourselves from the situation and break contact, sometimes that's just not possible, you know, and in many cases it's not because of ourselves, but because of people that are our loved ones, that you just alluded to, I alluded to, that we're just going to have to say, look, you know, dude, if it was just me, I'd run away, but you know, if you pull a gun out or really look like you're threatening and in a position to do some serious bodily injury to either me or my family, when I've got my family around, you're going to get shot. Sorry.
One other aspect that strikes me about the video, and that's crowd dynamics. I've worked everything from celebratory riots, which are riots too, where people they get caught up in the big games, big sporting events. We see lots of major cities, you know, big sporting events where they tear apart the city, burn things down in celebration of their team winning. Well, those often have violent spin-offs from them because people think they're not doing anything wrong. But then you also get into the destructive riots, which we've all seen on TV, you know, after the incident out in Ferguson, some of the other high-profile, you know, we're all old enough to remember the Watts riots and some of the LA riots after Rodney King. But in this incident, in this video that we're talking about here, it's a small crowd, but you saw people that joined in. The longer the incident took, you know, carried on, more people came running in from the periphery to join in, because now where it's not me doing this, it's us doing this, and somehow that lessens the culpability of all of it in some people's minds. And I only saw one person. I can't remember if I touched on this earlier. One person who tried to actually intervene and stop any of that that's happening. And Brian, I don't know if some of your stuff from your security days, if you could add in any of that.
Yeah, it's interesting with a group like that. If the alpha, the leader of the group, makes the first attack, it releases the other guys to jump in. And then they get more emboldened. The more time they have, the more they want to do things. And you can see kind of this escalation, like it's over and then it's back to again and back to again. And what they're doing is really solidifying their group. How they relate to each other. And if you can do something to change the dynamic very quickly, putting somebody on their heels, getting away from them, using a quick motion, simply extricate yourself as soon as you can from that situation, and get enough distance where it's no longer worth their time, then you get a lot of value for that, putting something in between you and them. But it's really interesting to watch that escalation process with a mob as one guy gets more emboldened with the other, and they're actually looking to each other sometimes for, hey, look, I'm going to do this. It looked like one guy was doing WWE moves, just trying stuff out, trying to make stuff out. And people in groups of 3 and above will do really weird stuff together, which they wouldn't think about by themselves. But that kind of group dynamic is very, very dangerous, and it's very important that at all costs you get away from them as quickly as you can, whatever that takes, whatever tool or method is available.
Yeah, in my classes, I talk about, if you pull into a convenience store to get gas and there's a crowd of people in the parking lot with nothing better to do but stand around in the parking lot, that's not where you need to be stopping and getting a gas. People just milling about parking lots or on the street with nothing to do, that's an avoid signal right there.
Yeah, nothing good comes of that. Nothing good comes of it.
Could you elaborate on that, Claude?
Well, it's pack behavior. We like to think that as humans that we're immune from, the animal response. But the fact of the matter is that we are group animals, and pack behavior will affect us. I mean, we see this in the police when we got into the whole concept of bunch shooting, where one police officer shoots, and even when another officer doesn't perceive actually the threat or can't discern it, he'll still shoot, or she'll still shoot just because there's shooting going on. So something needs to be shot, so I'll shoot it. Well, that's an example of pack behavior. And, we do it as humans. So when you see groups of people around, just as we were talking about a little bit ago, especially in social psychology, when you get into groups of 3 or more, weird things happen. And I just think that nothing good comes of being in any proximity to that, which is why I generally stay away from any events like that. I'm just, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to me anymore, because there's, and as we saw in those Minneapolis videos, the risk profile goes up. And I think, and this is another part of being older, is sometimes you have to say, well, I'm just not sure this is worth taking the risk for anymore. When I was younger, yeah, it was great, but it's just not worth it to me.
So what do you, is what the threat looks like? That seems to be changing a lot. You know what I mean? I mean, I know there's never ever really been a look, but you got young, or old, however you want to look at it, teens that look like they come from decent families. It's not like your stereotypical, the guy with the either the beard or the beady eyes or the certain kind of dress or anything. What can people do to see? You can't be afraid of every group of teens that comes and sit down. older Boy Scouts or a baseball team comes up, what do people need to look for when they're out and about and the threat doesn't look like a threat? What can people do to kind of protect themselves?
We've got to look past what people look like. That's deceptive.
Right.
What we need to look at is what are they doing and what's the vibe, especially when you're with a group or, approaching a group or you see a group. What's the vibe? And we talk about this even on a one-on-one level, that people will say, I felt it, that there was something wrong about this guy, but I just didn't want to, disengaged or go the other way or something because I didn't want to embarrass them or I didn't want to embarrass myself. And I think this kind of incident shows that, we're going to have to accept the fact that that's not only on an individual basis, but also on a group basis, that you can kind of feel it, that, is there tension there? Is there an excessive level of excitement? And if there is, well, then maybe we just need to go the other way and not feel embarrassed about that. There's, unless you live way out in the middle of nowhere, there's another gas station, there's another Walmart, there's another Target, there's some other place that you can go, and maybe you have to drive another 5 minutes. Or maybe it's just you drive around the parking lot. If you look at a lot of places, the parking lots are pretty big. And, all of my girlfriends have just always found my parking lot behavior to be intolerable almost because I drive around the parking lot and my one would just yell at me. She'd say, "What are you doing?" And I say, "I'm looking for ambushes and scumbags. And if we're going to, go into this place because you want to go into this place, I'm parking on the other side of the lot from problems. And I'm going to position the car so that we can get out of here quickly if we need to." And I think that, it's that level of awareness, not just of people, because we all talk about, in the industry, talk about people, being aware of people around you. But now it looks like we're going to have to start looking at, what are groups of people doing around us as well, and not feel bad about just leaving, or certainly modifying our approach to, if we really need to go into this place. Obviously, if you have a medical appointment and you have to go to some medical facility, well, you're not going to blow that appointment off because there's some people in the parking lot. But you might modify the way you go into the building or where you park or something like that. And I think we're just going to have to accept that that's part of our situational awareness that we're going to have to follow in the future.
Claude, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Since we're all firearms instructors and shooters and interested in this show, if I have to practice and I can only practice at an indoor range, how would I address practicing for a situation like this? What can I do at an indoor range that would allow me, because most of us can't get outside to shoot, and doing multiple targets and stuff like that. And I know you're really interested in indoor range practice techniques. Is there something that we could do at the indoor range that would help us become better shooters and more competent, be able to take a difficult shot like this, or engage in multiple targets?
Well, that's a good question, Brian, because as we all know, those of us who shot on indoor ranges, using multiple full-size silhouettes is just not on our to-do list. You can't do it. So, but there are a number of smaller targets that we can use. For instance, dot torture is a good example where, with dot torture, even though they're small targets, you're learning to move from target to target, back and forth. And although that's not quite the same as shooting on multiple silhouettes, it gets us used to the idea that we've got to shift our focus to another target, get on the sights on that target, address it correctly, and then maybe move back to the first target. And I think that there's a lot of drills like that, and people need to be more aware of the different kind of things that they can do at indoor ranges that typically people don't think about. The most common thing that I used to see at indoor ranges was people would buy one silhouette, maybe a box or maybe two of ammunition, and they would just fill that silhouette full of holes until it looked like a piece of Swiss cheese, not just the silhouette itself, but the whole piece of paper it was on. And they never marked it, and they really had no idea where the rounds were going. And for people that are interested in this kind of practice, well, there are a number of drills. Pistoltraining.com. Todd Green, the late Todd Green, had a lot of multiple drills that could be printed on a single piece of printer paper at home and take it with you to the range and tape it to the back of a silhouette that you buy there. And that way you get some practice at that kind of situation where at least you're used to the idea you got to maneuver from target to target and perhaps back. So I think that's one way of doing it.
What about practicing your draw? I mean, it's going to be really important in this situation.
Well, the hard part of the draw is not what it was thought to be for many years. And it's taken me a while to convince my fellow instructors about this, but I think a lot of them are starting to get into the idea that the hardest part of the draw is not establishing grip and clearing the holster. The hardest part of the draw, that's the most time-consuming part of it. The hardest part of the draw is actually acquiring the sights so that you can make a good hit. That part, we can do at an indoor range by starting at what I call the midpoint of the draw stroke. When we draw the pistol from the holster, we're going to establish grip. We're going to bring it straight up. It's never going to come low, which all of us have seen that where people do that bowling swooping motion. But correctly done, they should bring it up, and then as the pistol turns horizontal, parallel to the ground, they're going to bring it underneath their dominant eye and then press it out to the target. Well, that point where the pistol turns horizontal and then is oriented toward the target, that's a good starting position for working from an indoor range or at an indoor range. And that way you're able to practice the hardest part of the draw stroke, which is getting the sights into the eye target line as soon as you can, and then pressing off a good shot. The other part, establishing grip and clearing leather, that's pretty easily practiced in dry practice at home. Even if, and even for somebody who had a blue gun or some kind of inert replica of their pistol, they could do that at home and then do the live fire part of it from the midpoint of the draw stroke at the range. I think that's the best way that I've been able to figure out to do it, and I've had clients that have really improved their skills simply by using that method, even on ranges where they weren't allowed to draw from a holster.
Breaking that up and working on it separately kind of helps anyway. Even if you have the ability to do the whole thing, breaking those steps out sometimes helps because you're working on that one aspect of it.
Yes, that's true. But then you're able to focus on a single part of the draw stroke instead of having to put all four phases of it. I don't like to think of it as counts, because what I find is that when people learn a 4-count draw stroke, they will almost inevitably have a pause somewhere within it and I'm not really sure why that is. So I think of it as what we did at the Rogers School of phases of it, where it's just, okay, one phase leads into the other. And when you break it down and only practice one or two phases at a time, it can be helpful.
Claude, you said something to me one night at dinner. It was you and Brian and Shelley and Tom and Lynn Givens and I all at a place there in Marietta that Shelley used to frequent. I don't know if I was supposed to tell that part there, Brian. I'm sorry if it wasn't. You made a comment at dinner that night that a lot of firearms training classes are nothing but firing squad training.
Yes.
And that comment, I don't know if you noticed, I sat back in my chair, and for like the next 5 or 10 minutes, I sat there just thinking about this. Okay, what do I need to do in my next class in case Claude shows up? So that it's not, because I've seen Claude show up at people's classes and stand over on the side, seeing something, start scribbling in that notebook. I'm like, Lord, if he ever shows up, I want that to be good scribbles when he comes. And so my defensive pistol skills class was actually designed around that comment and the 4 universal safety rules. And all that to lead into, tell people what you mean by that. And, it's not just standing there and poking holes in paper. There's decisional aspects that go along with it. And I guess if you would tie that in with Brian's question is, if all you have to do, only place you have to practice is on an indoor range, how can you work some of those decisional drills into those sessions?
Well, I'm going to toot my books. Indoor range practice sessions and concealed carry skills and drills, that I specifically put in drills that were decisional drills, because I think that's one of the things that we in the industry have been really weak about. And the way you do that is by using, at least the drills that I've designed are based on the idea of having multiple targets. And in some cases, what I use is playing cards. One of the drills is built around the idea of using a deck of playing cards and basing your decision to shoot or not to shoot and where to shoot on the target based on the cards you draw. And then you move through the deck, and sometimes you have a no shoot. Sometimes you'll have a number of shots and using the number on the card to indicate the number of shots you'll fire, and do that on a specific numbered circle. And I think that's really important, that we get past the idea of that we have to be able to do everything in a purely technical sense of pure marksmanship and leave that whole decisional exercise out of it. That's a big problem, because in my study of serious mistakes and negative outcomes, there's only one category, downrange failures, where marksmanship is the issue. The other 10 categories are all based on decisions, bad decisions that people made, and that got them into a lot of trouble. So I think the more that we teach people to what Paul Markel called think with a gun in their hand, the better we're doing for our clients as instructors.
So, Claude, I have a question for you and an observation. As much as we were talking about mob mentality, the exact opposite exists in our firearms training, where the first person to shoot gives permission to everybody else on the line to shoot.
Right. Right.
And during a drill, that first guy that's the quickest, he gives everybody else, they'll be kind of iffy about it. So it's an interesting inverse process that we also have. What are some tools we can use that will put some pressure on us and measure our performance in shooting, so that we don't get stuck in this firing squad sort of mentality, like timers and scoring methodologies and targets?
It helps, obviously, if we're talking about not doing what the pack does, it helps to practice in groups. And one of the things that I did, I don't know, it's about 5-6 years ago, was an idea that Craig Douglas gave me. I designed a set of targets that can still be purchased from Action Targets, where it was a set of 3 targets, and they were all similar, but they were all different. And not all the numbers. One of the problems with a lot of those targets is the numbers and the colors on all 3 on all the set are all the same. And what I did was I designed it where some of the targets had some numbers and some colors, and other targets had others. And so, for instance, I could have I used to teach a class called Use of Force, where the whole firing line would be up and would be in a position to shoot at the same time, but there were sets of 3 different targets. So depending on what color or number I would call. Some people got a shoot decision, some people got a different shoot decision, and some people got a no shoot decision. And I think that's the kind of training that we need to, especially in classes. It's a little difficult to do that when practicing on your own unless you've got a group of dedicated people. Like I know there's one study group here in Atlanta that goes down to South River Gun Club once a month and does that type of work. But certainly in classes, I think that the ability to teach people that some people be shooting, but if you don't have a target, you shouldn't be shooting. I think that's feasible and is probably something that's worthwhile. But even on an individual basis, just having the idea of a shoot decision or no shoot decision that's sort of random, and that's why I like playing cards, because and I try to structure things where people don't need a lot of equipment, because most people, face it, they're not going to spend a lot of money on target systems and so forth. And I perfectly understand that. Money is a resource constraint that people go through. But 2 packs of playing cards can be had for $1 at a dollar store, and with a little bit of imagination, you can think about how to just structure your training, your practice, I should say, so that you get used to the idea that not every time you pull your gun out, or even that you perceive a threat, is necessarily going to be a shoot situation.
Going in a whole different vein or line of questioning. I was looking at some stats the other day, and I was noticing kind of like a trend, like in the early to late 80s, well, early to mid 80s, I guess, before you were seeing a lot of semi-automatics and, the policemen carrying them. It seemed like the amount of shots fired in an incident seemed to correlate with right around 6 rounds. And now it seems like now that everybody's got 15, 17 rounds, it seems like those same stats are going up. Is that a mind thing, or is it just shooting the gun till it's empty, or what do you think that? Why do you think there's no?
I think it's time. It's time.
Mm-hmm.
It takes, unless you train real hard with it, a revolver is slower to shoot simply because of the mechanical action of the trigger. A revolver is slower to shoot than an autoloader is. Mm-hmm. So, many of us have heard that, 3 seconds, 3 yards, 3 shots deal. Well, that came about in the revolver days because it took 3 seconds to fire 3 shots. Well, now that you can fire 4 shots a second, what do you get? Well, in 3 seconds, now you can fire 12 shots. Actually, John Farnham made a comment, and I verified this by looking at the NYPD SOP reports, that when they went to autoloaders, the number of shots went up. And initially, when the NYPD went to autoloaders, they were using Clinton clips. So the officers only had 10 rounds in the gun. And so as more and more of the officers started using their Glocks, because in NYPD, the officers buy their own guns. So, they don't get issued throughout the department, and officers can pretty much, at least until recently, they could keep the gun that they started in service with all of their career. Mm-hmm. So when they first started buying the 10-round magazines they were limited to, then the shot counts tended to go up toward 10 shots. And then after a while, NYPD wised up and started issuing full capacity magazines, or allowing full capacity magazines. And John had made the comment that he thought he had expected that the shot count would go up, but it didn't. It still remained at about 10. Well, that's because that's about what they could fire in 3 seconds, in my opinion. Now, that's purely an educated speculation on my part, but that's really what I think it boils down to, is that how many rounds can you fire in a specific amount of time, and 3 seconds to be a pretty good one, pretty good benchmark for that. That's why they went up, not necessarily because they had more shots to fire. If you had I think if they'd had a 10-round revolver that they could fire in 3 seconds, we would have seen 10 shots being fired 30 years ago too.
I had no idea the cops were limited to 10 rounds also.
Yeah, that's the way they were initially. When they first started allowing their officers to purchase Glocks, they had to use Clinton clips.
I wonder if the 12-pound, when they went to 12-pound triggers, I wonder if that slowed them down or not.
That's something I don't know.
Go ahead, Lee.
Oh, well, along with what Claude is just saying right there, Brian, you're going to learn all this here in a class you're about to be taking here in a few weeks from the Force Science Institute. And I may have mentioned this on the show previously. The same amount of time that it takes for you to make a decision to start an action is the same amount of time that it takes you to make a decision to stop an action.
They're both decisions.
The reaction time is reaction time, and reaction time is only part of the equation. Reaction time is just the time it takes for you to react. Reaction time plus movement equals response time. That's actually your total time. So, Brian, the answer to every question is a quarter of a second, by the way. If the average human reaction time to a known stimulus is a quarter of a second. But Claude, at the elite Rogers Shooting School, you have a half second to hit that 8-inch plate when it pops up. Because you have to have the time to make the movement to complete the action. It's really, Rogers should be response time shooting, not reactive time shooting.
Well, when I first started teaching at the school, Bill referred to it as reaction time, and he still thinks of reaction time in the quarter second increments that he used to. But he's now, about the time I left the school, he started talking exactly about that in terms of response time being a combination of the reaction time and movement time. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
And where that comes into play is you get the stimulus, or a person gets the stimulus, they start shooting. When the situation changes, the same amount of time that it took them to initiate the shooting is the same amount of time that it takes them to terminate the shooting. And exactly what Claude was just saying is, okay, they used to fire maybe one shot in that amount of time, 2 shots at the most. Now they're firing 4 shots in that amount of time.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with your analogy there, is that it's just they could do more in that time than what they could previously.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think that's a often overlooked portion of it. If you go to the Force Science's webpage, they have 2 articles in their media there talking about shots in the back and why they're not an indicator of a bad shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the person that you're shooting at turned to run away because you started shooting at them, and then you had to stop shooting. Now,
yeah, so it's not like that person had a malevolent intent.
Right.
It was just, sorry, time ran out, and they were still firing.
You know, and we can scientifically explain 1, maybe 2 shots back there. We can't explain 8.
Yeah.
Brian?
Here's an interesting thing for you guys, too. Do you know how many punches a human being can throw per second? 4. Sometimes 5 if they're really well trained. So we see the same problem with the human response rate with somebody punching. Kicks seem to be 2 per second, but a good fighter can throw 4 or 5 punches a second, and that's it. Yeah. It's a real limit for human beings, and it's interesting that those times parallel what we see in the shooting community exactly with split times and decisional times, and it's very helpful. In that vein, Claude, I know you do a lot of work on sifting through data. What is the best way to find data, statistics, and things that are actually true, that are validated, instead of just repeating everything we hear from everybody else? Lee's been to Force Science Institute. How do you come up with your data, and I know it's not always popular with everybody, but it's really pertinent. I think that they understand how you get to it in the long run.
First of all, I don't make, I'll say I try not to make a preemptive judgment based on one or two anecdotes. And it's funny how many times people will say to me, well, the plural of anecdote is not data. And then they'll cite an anecdote to try to prove me wrong about my data, which I always find that an interesting paradox, but that's another story about human psychology. But over the years, and especially my time at Deloitte was very helpful to me in this regard, because one thing that accountants are really good at is gathering data and looking at numbers. And that's the approach that I try to do, that I try to look at what's the largest data set that I can acquire, that I can find. Like, one of the things that I have found immensely useful over the past 5 years when I first discovered it was the Los Angeles Police Department Board of Police Commissioners publishes a fairly detailed report. They're seldom less than 6 pages, and some of them are as many as 50, about every discharge of a firearm by a Los Angeles police officer since 2005. And they're all available on the website. There's over 1,000 of them. And I'm willing to bet that I am the only geek in the world who has read every single one of them. And some of them are not particularly applicable to us, except in terms of entertainment. For instance, there actually was a Los Angeles police incident that was very similar to the Heat shootout in Michael Mann's movie, although it actually occurred after the movie rather than before. But there are also a fair number of off-duty incidents involving Los Angeles police officers. And the nice thing about the Board of Police Commissioners reports is that they actually go into detail on what was the reason for the contact, what were the circumstances that happened, and then the board renders a judgment on it and what the reasons for judgment were. And they break it down into display of a weapon, use of deadly force, and tactics. And they either approve what the officer did, or they, in some cases, say this warrants administrative disapproval, which I assume is not particularly career enhancing for the officer. But reading that kind of thing really gives me a lot of information, because in some cases they will break out how many feet the officer was when they fired at the individual, and there's a lot of other sources like that. Most of the big police departments now do the same sort of thing. They generally don't have the length of them because of the fact that Los Angeles was under the federal consent decree for so long. Their reports go back to 2005, and not many police departments are like that. But that, and then looking at incidents of private citizens, which now that we have the age of Google where we can do a lot of research, in many cases what I do is I go to Google Maps and I can find where the incident took place and get a pretty good idea from the Google map of what the distances were, what were the angles, who was able to take cover, who was not able to take cover, things like that, and do a fairly detailed analysis of it. And that sort of information and that sort of research is what drives the way I think about what we need to do.
I don't know where that nickname tactical professor comes from. Yeah, it's a strange one. No, so Tim Reedy from TDR Training, he wants to know what benefits can semi-auto shooters gain from training or practicing or competing with revolvers?
Well, for one thing, revolvers require you to be aware of the trigger in a way that an autoloader does not. And I think that our ability to be aware of the trigger and what's happening with it, even at a subconscious level. Because after a while, I noticed that I get finished with matches, and I spent a whole year shooting IDPA, including 2 state championships with snub revolvers. And, at the end of that time, I just was not aware of my trigger on a conscious level. But the fact of the matter is I was out shooting most of the people who had autoloaders. So obviously I was doing something right with it. And I think that awareness of trigger action, and also there's an aspect of the fact that you don't have that much ammunition, so you have to use it wisely. So I think both of those are things that shooting a revolver helps a semi-autoloader, semi-automatic pistol shooter gain that they then apply.
Cool. Also, before I hand it over to Lee, Applied Performance Shooting wants to know, what do you think is the number one most neglected skill in the self-defense training community as a whole?
Decisional shooting. That once again, I'll go back to the thing that from the standpoint of personal protection, and I prefer to use the term personal protection as opposed to self-defense, because in many cases the person we're protecting is not ourself.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody talks about, I have my gun to protect me and my family. Well, that implies that the person you're protecting is not yourself. Well, those ability to make decisions is the key thing that we're lacking. And it's sort of an odd division, if you will, that the ability to use the pistol well gives you the ability to make decisions better, because of the fact that your mind is not clouded with, how do I make this thing work? Mm-hmm. For people who have not touched their gun in a year, when they pick it up, they have to think about it. I mean, think about if your wife was going to have a baby and you hadn't driven a car in a year, and then all of a sudden you had to pile her into your car and drive her at a high rate of speed to the hospital. How comfortable would you be with that? Especially if you weren't a good driver in the first place. You'd probably not be very comfortable with it. Well, guns are no different than that. Mm-hmm. And so, Tom Givens has that phrase, when you last practiced is more important than how much you last practiced. I think is very apt. That I've been going through some old FBI documents from the 1930s, and their standard set by J. Edgar Hoover was that they had to fire 30 rounds a month and had to know their mechanical condition of their revolvers. Now, 30 rounds of ammunition is not a whole lot of ammo, but if you're firing it every month to a standard, then, within a year or so, you're not really going to be thinking about the gun. You're going to be thinking about the situation. What you're doing with the gun will come subconsciously.
Nice.
Along with that, Dr. Bill Lewinsky has a saying that an expert has an automatic use of the tool.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not saying that you're using it automatically, as in, I remember say how he actually says it. It's, when you have practiced and trained to the point that you're not having to think about the operation of the tool. When you use the driving analogy, when you first started learning how to drive, you would get in, then you'd have to look around where you put the key in the ignition. You'd crank up the car, then you'd have to, you'd watch the gear shift as you shifted, the gear shift into gear, and you had to, okay, for those of us that learned on a stick shift, slowly in on the gas, slowly out on the clutch, and you'd walk yourself through all these steps, and 2 years down the road, you're jumping in, you're driving with 2 fingers on the steering wheel, texting, doing all this other stuff you're not supposed to be doing. It's because you developed that automatic use of driving the car. And that goes exactly to what you're saying there with the firearm, is just the familiarity with the tool to the point that you're not having to put conscious effort into using the tool, that it frees up brain power for processing the situation.
Right. That's exact, and that's the key part of it, is that our processing power is finite, and the more of it that we have to use for the physical manipulation of the firearm, the less of it we have to analyze the situation and make our decisions. Conversely, the less conscious effort that we have to put into operating the pistol, the more we have available for decision making and situational analysis in the moment.
And one thing that you and I have talked about with this topic, and you mentioned the negative outcomes earlier. Once the first bad decision is made, there tends to be a cascade of bad decisions that follow. And I'm going to turn it over to you,
just goes downhill.
Yeah.
It just goes downhill. And there are more incidents like that in my database than I can count. That as soon as somebody makes a bad decision, like doesn't identify his daughter when she comes into the house at 3 o'clock because she was at a party and wanted to sneak in, and shoots her, then all the bad decisions start following that. Drive too fast at a hospital, get in a crash on the way, have to call the paramedics and come and get you both out of the car and take you to the hospital and get you both patched up. There's definitely that cascade effect, because then what we're thinking about is the bad decision. It's hard to look forward when we have that bad decision immediately in our past. I think that's human nature, that we're going to be preoccupied with what we did that was the wrong thing, as opposed to when we do the right thing, then we can automatically start thinking forward to, what do I need to do next to, make the best of the situation as it is.
Go ahead, Brian, and then I'll ask one last one, and we're almost out of time.
Claude, what kind of decisions should we practice? We've talked a lot about decisional drills, but what are some common things for the armed citizen, the decisions that they need to practice in their dry practice and at the range?
I think that it's very hard for people to understand just how hard it is to identify people in your house when you're scared. If people would do nothing else other than practice making decisions at home about who's in my house, and get this utter foolishness of, I'll shoot anyone in my house, out of their head, because that's one of the most irresponsible things that any gun owner could say or think. If they got used to the idea of, I need to be hesitant about this. In fact, John Johnson made a very good comment about this when he said, we need to err on the side of safety, not on the side of our tactics. So, my general idea is that when you hear the bump of night at the home, it's 97% probability that it's a member of your family, or at least somebody who doesn't need to be shot, and only a 3% possibility that it's an intruder. So for people to decide that ahead of time and say, I'm going to err on the side of caution. It's almost like the Hippocratic Oath. First, I'm going to do no harm. If they learn to make that single decision, that would save about at least 50 to 60 people a year that I can catalog who get shot by a member of their family when they shouldn't have.
So I got 2 questions from the chat that I'm going to try to kind of combine into one, so I'm still only asking one last question. But so Ryan McCann wants to know if participating in different styles of shooting competitions can help or potentially hurt your ability to think or make good decisions with a gun in your hand. And Don Towers said at TACCON 219, you talked about making decisions and goals ahead of time. Can you speak a little bit on that?
I think, to answer Don's question, thinking about what the right decision is ahead of time is a real game changer for people that they don't do. It's not always easy to recognize what's a bad decision, but I think, especially when we're thinking ahead of time, understanding what the right decision is. For instance, when we were talking about that that incident in Minneapolis with all the beatings, well, that's what we were doing, is we were wargaming that ahead of time. And by the way, wargaming has a different meaning, and I won't go into that, but wargaming in the military context has a very different meaning than the way most people use it. But thinking about what's the decision in this, is, in my case, is it a good decision for me to just spray these guys and then run like hell? Well, yeah, then I don't have to live with the idea that maybe this guy got beaten to death and I could have helped him and I didn't, when he was obviously the person that was not the attacker. So to answer Don's question, I think that's very true. I'm glad he brought that up. And second, I'd say to the question about is competition going to hurt us? And I said this many years ago. If shooting one match a month messes up your tactics so badly that you're afraid you're going to make a mistake based on your competition, your training hasn't been very good so far. That's just the way I think about it. What competition does, the biggest single thing that competition does for people, especially people who are new to guns, is it teaches them how to handle them safely. Mm-hmm. The shooting aspect is almost secondary to that, but most people really have a poor idea of what safe gun handling is. And any decent competition, USPSA, IDPA, I-Corps, Steel Challenge, Glock Sports Shooting Foundation, all of those teach people how to be safe in a fairly automatic manner. And that's a huge step that the average gun owner never makes, is just learning to handle their guns safely. And so I think that competition is very healthy, even if you got nothing else but that out of it.
Right. I tell you, I've really gotten, IDPA has really grown on me, and the thing that I like most about it now is the thing I hated most about it before, and it was all the rules and people, they're being a kind of a set out thing of the order you have to do things in. Mm-hmm. Because I've been a boss since I was, a guy in charge, not a boss, but, but I've been a supervisor, let's say, since I was, before I could drive, so I've never liked being told what to do. I've never had a lot of being told what to do. So guess what I'm not really good at is listening to something and following this task out in this predetermined path. So it helps me work on that thing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So
sure, I can see that absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, it still makes me mad, but, but I like it because I like being. I remember for the first, 3-4 matches, all I wanted to do was do a match and not get a PE. I just want to. I don't even care anymore where I come in. I just don't want a PE, But so we're running out of time here. So Lee, what do you got going on? Where can people find you? Got anything you want to clue anybody in on?
Web page is firstpersonsafety.com. Same thing on Facebook. Same thing on Instagram. First Person Safety. October 12th and 13th, I'll be up in Virginia at John Murphy's range, teaching the debut of my 2-day traveling roadshow, Applied Pistol Craft. There are only 3 spots left in that class, so if you want in on it, now's the time. I've got that class booked in March in McLeod, Oklahoma, and in May in Crum, Texas. And then I'll be presenting in TACCON. We had the question earlier about semi-automatic shooters shooting revolvers. I'm actually teaching a revolver block at TACCON this year. So there'll be, cool. I'm doing that block, and Marty Hayes is also doing a revolver block. That's my understanding. So there will be 2 opportunities at TACCON for people who want to walk over to the wheel gun side for a little while.
I wonder how many snazzy wheel guns Daryl Bulkey will bring. Have you seen his collection? When
all of them.
It's amazing.
He came to my lever gun block last year, and of course everybody else is out there running the mill Marlins and Winchesters, and Daryl shows up with this, Brockman worked over everything you could possibly have done to a lever gun, and in the prelim to the shooting, I talk about one of the failures of it is it's a sporting design. When you try to press it into some of these scenarios we're pressing them into, you may have a failure. The only gun that went down in the class was Daryl's. And it was exactly one of the things that I said, be sure you're looking out for this, and this screw's backing out. And he had a screw back out of this $3,000 lever gun.
DB's got an arsenal. He's got some nice stuff. Brian, what do you got going on? Where can people get a hold of you?
The CompleteCombatant at gmail.com or CompleteCombatant.com. And got a lot of classes coming up. I do have a class on the road in Mississippi at Boondocks, October 26th, 27th. Got a couple spots left in that. I'd love to see anybody who's in that neck of the woods to come out. I'm teaching at Active Self-Protection Tactical Conference next weekend, and the registration closes on Saturday for that. All the proceeds are going to the organization that helps teens there. So John Correa is doing this, and they've raised quite a bit of money for this camp, and it's just an exceptional thing. So if you're interested in that, I think you have until Saturday to sign up for it. And then otherwise, we'll be teaching at the range, or I'll be at the gym at fusionfitnessandmma.com. And I'd love to see anybody stop by anytime. Thanks for having me on the show again, too.
Oh, definitely. Claude, where can people get a hold of you?
The best place is at my blog, tacticalprofessor.com. I'm also on Facebook as Claude Werner, the Tactical Professor, and I have an Instagram account and a YouTube account that all go by Tactical Professor. I've got 5 books available for purchase for download, especially for people who are interested in indoor ranges. I think I've probably covered that ground more than any other instructor in the country. And especially for people who are newer to shooting, that's probably a good resource for them. And I would like for everybody to buy my book, Serious Mistakes Gun Owners Make, not only because it will enrich me beyond my wildest dreams, but also to keep them from shooting their spouse and their kids.
Nice. And now it's time for the most explosive minute in podcastery, Rapid Fire 2.0. So these questions are for you to answer for yourself, not what you suggest for other people, but for you. And they're as the rapid fire connotation suggests, they're short, succinct answers. So to start it off, number 1, is competition a good augment to defensive training? This is just for you, Claude.
Yes.
Least favorite skill to practice?
I'm sorry?
Least favorite skill to practice?
Reloading.
Biggest training myth?
The hardest part of the draw is establishing grip.
Striker fire, double action or single action only?
Double action.
Appendix or strong side hip?
Both.
In the home, pistol, rifle, or shotgun?
Pistol.
One thing you carry every day other than your gun?
Pepper spray.
Red dot or irons on a pistol?
For now, I'll say irons.
3 books that you recommend that are must-reads. They don't have to be firearm related.
How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which everybody who carries a gun should read. In the Gravest Extreme by Masad Ayub, and Serious Mistakes Gun Owners Make by Claude Werner.
Please recommend one peer teacher, trainer, coach, or instructor, no one on the panel.
John Farnham.
Awesome.
Phenomenal. We actually had John on as a previous guest.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, we still got about 10 minutes left. Don't go anywhere. Let me get through these announcements, and then we get to final thoughts with our guests and our co-hosts. So stand by with us. Stay tuned for a little longer. So folks who have inquired about our CCR t-shirts, we're currently doing a pre-order, and the pre-order for the folks who ordered in July, August, and early September, just want to let you guys know that went in the beginning of the week. They should be here by next week and out to you guys the week after. So thank you all for your patience. We're only doing them once every 3 months since it's a pre-order. If you're interested in getting a shirt, please send a $20 payment and add $5 for 2XLs or larger to our PayPal link here in the show notes, www.paypal.me/CC radio. In the notes section, please put your size and address. Again, since it's a pre-order, just be patient because it only goes out once every 3 months. So if you put it in now, it's going to be, 2.5 months from now. To become a corporate sponsor or to advertise on the show, please send us an email to me at baraka3@gmail.com. Folks, please subscribe, leave your feedback by commenting on the bottom of this YouTube video you're watching now, and please hit the alert icon to get notifications when we go live. Please give us a thumbs up, folks, because YouTube, unfortunately, is demonetizing all firearms related stuff. They don't even make if, ands, or buts about it. It's just written there now. So we don't get any money off the videos played, but by you guys giving us thumbs up, please share it. It gives the algorithm more people will see it. The more thumbs up, the more likes it has. So please share it. If you guys value it, please share it with your peers on your Facebook, on your social media, things like that. And do us a favor and pass that around. We have limited show notes in the YouTube description because it has a character limit. So please go to Firearms Radio TV and see our full show notes there. Just go to Google and type it in, and you'll see our website, which is firearmsradio.tv/civilian carry radio. We have all of Claude's links there to his social media, to his website, where you can find his books, his Instagram, as well as his Facebook page. We are on Twitter at CC_radio2A. We're on Instagram. Follow us there at CC_radio2A. Alan's not on Instagram, but Tatiana on IR. My Instagram is listed in the show notes, as well as Tatiana's, who's not here tonight. Please give us a follow if you guys want. We're on Facebook at CC_radio2A. And here is a listing of 9 out of the 137 audio podcast stations that currently play our show, listed below. The most popular being iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podbean, On Speaker, and Player FM. Also see our show notes for Airtis Industries, discounts from our different various industry partners, including Airtis Industries, ATI Guns, Sojourner. Thanks for messaging me and using the giving us the shout that you got a $57 discount on using ATI Guns code, which is CCR ATI 10 for 10% off slide work, refinishing services. We also have a code there for Battle Comp, Big Tex Outdoors, Dark Angel Medical, Dark Star Gear, Fire Clean, Trident Concepts. So please see our show notes for all of those, and go and help out these people that are looking to save you some money, that support our show. We really appreciate it. Please join us next Wednesday, September the 25th, for our 113th episode. We will feature Mr. G.W. Ayers. He's a 22-year U.S. Army vet and Vice President of Government Relations at Rainier Arms. The next week after that, I'm only putting up 5 at a time, folks. We're booked 4 months out, and I know you guys get sick of me reading a very long list, so I'm just doing 5 at a time from now on. But behind GW's show, our 114th episode on October 2nd will be Craig Douglas. Then behind that, October 9th will be Rob Hott. Behind that is John Hearn. And behind that is Dr. Sherman House returns, owner of Civilian Defender. The announcements we have is registration is open for TACCON 2020. Location is Dallas Pistol Club in Carrollton, Texas. Dates are March 27th through 29th, 2020, next year. Alan and I bought tickets the first few hours they were out because Lee let us know right when the link was open. We'd hope to join you, that you guys will join us there. The whole CC Radio cast will be there. Tatiana will be presenting. Lee will be there. Brian, will you be there?
I will.
Claude, will you be there?
I will be there, but not presenting. I will be the historian for the conference.
Awesome. So everybody you see here and here, it will be there. So please come and join us if you can. Also, folks, check out our show notes for a link to DC Project Rally for Gun Rights. Tatiana is our state representative for Maine out of the 50 women that go down there and talk to the politicians about gun rights for us. And from there, I pass it to Alan for final thoughts.
I love the analytical way that you approach stuff, Claude. I think it's great. We definitely need somebody doing that, and coming up with some of these alternative thoughts on things. I think it's good when if everybody's agreeing on everything all the time. I don't think we're gonna go anywhere with expanding and our knowledge base. I enjoyed the conversation. And as far as that video thing goes, I hope everybody out there really takes away, if nothing else, from that the threat isn't always going to look like a threat. And we really got to be aware of our surroundings and what's going on. Sometimes in the wrong situation, you get one time to make that mistake. So, listen to these guys, get some instruction from these guys that we have on the show. We're not just, pulling names out of a hat. Baraka especially does a lot of legwork and a lot of, effort goes into getting these people that we have on the show, because they're the people that us and all of our previous guests agree that you need to be learning from. So take advantage.
All right. Thank you, Alan. Final thoughts, Lee?
Well, when I got your text the other day asking me to be on the show tonight, and I saw that Claude was going to be the guest, I was like, oh, great. This is going to be really good. I'll get to ask a few things that, like the firing squad comment. I wanted to bring that up with him on the air tonight. And then when I saw the post go up today that Brian was going to be the guest host, I'm like, this is just going to be like Saturday night dinner. Just everybody else gets to join in. It's been fun to be here tonight. Claude, I want to thank Claude for keeping me on my toes. One of the things that when I started out in this business, on the business side of this, is I didn't want to be a parrot. I didn't want to, if I couldn't offer anything unique and it builds on what other people do, but something unique too, then there was no point in me doing this. I could just go help other people or just not do it at all. And, a lot of the things I do is like, how do I keep Claude from scolding me if he sees this? And I very much appreciate that. I very much do. And for those of you out there that haven't experienced Brian's training, go. Brian does an excellent job. What I preach to the people who come to my classes about is you need to go up to Kennesaw and train with Brian, because Brian will teach you how to not have to do any of this stuff that we're doing. And I really and truly think that's a more important skill, the escapes, everything else that Brian's teaching. Excellent material there. And I'm just happy to be here tonight with both of them. And to Alan and Baraka, thanks for the chance to continue to be involved in this show. I helped Tom with a class in South Dakota in August, and two of the students in South Dakota, oh, we know you. You're on that Swing and Carry radio show sometimes.
No way.
And then they would bring up an episode that they saw. So for any of you in South Dakota that are listening tonight, it was fun meeting you guys, fun hanging out there. And in that class, there was a cop from Iowa. I will only give his first name because he doesn't need it and all that else, but his name was Lane. Phenomenal performance in that class. And I'm very excited to see Lane, a young man from Oklahoma by the name of David Cagle, and a young man from Tennessee by the name of Ryan McCann, who are, if Brian and I are part of the group that's following on Tom and Claude and everything, those are the guys we're going to turn it over to one day. And I'm very, very excited after what those three guys especially have to offer to the community. And I hope they're up here sooner than later. I'm really excited to see the enthusiasm that they're bringing to the industry.
Thank you so much, Lee. That was awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Brian, your final thoughts, bro.
All right. There's two really important decisions that every man makes. One is who he marries, and the other one is who he surrounds himself with. And I am fortunate enough to call both these men my friends, and I am able to bounce ideas and train with both of them. And it makes me a better instructor to be surrounded with deep thinkers that are, I call Claude the clarifier. Lee will sneak up on you. He puts this whole country boy thing on like he's not really paying attention, and then he'll ask you a question and it'll jab you right in the ribs. But he also likes to keep me on my toes by making fun of me too, which keeps me nice and humble. And I am a fortunate man to have both of these guys in my life. And basically, we all live in the same area and we train together. And you'd think three trainers would be in competition with each other, but if nothing else, we have a synergistic approach that makes all of us better. We recommend each other's classes, and we grow from it. And if people don't understand what Claude's talking about, they need to get on his blog. They need to read it, because he thinks in a way that more of us need to. And he clarifies things, and he asks the hard questions, and he gives you answers that maybe you don't want to hear, but maybe you need to think about a little bit more. And he has probably done more for the top level trainers that are presenting, because it's amazing how many people I watch have come conversations with Claude and say, hey, Claude, what do you think about this? I know Lee does it. I know I do it. Some other people like John Johnson, people like that have done it. And then just a little side note for Civilian Carrier Radio, I was at a match the other night, and I helped one of the new shooters. Because you know how hard it is to be a new shooter at a USPSA match. And we talked, and I said, listen, if you ever need any help, I'll be glad to help you. And the next time I went to the match, and he goes, oh, man, I didn't know who you were. I had no idea. I saw you on Civilian Carrier Radio. You're really a big deal.
Wow.
So there's your pump up, guys. Thank you, and I'm always honored to be here and glad to help in any way. And thank you both, you gentlemen, for the friendship and the help along the way.
All right, thank you so much,
Cool.
Brian.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. Claude, we leave the last final thought to you after I say my little spiel. And Brian's got me, as always. Brian's such a deep, emotional guy, so he just pulls that all up out of me. So, first of all, I want to thank everybody in the live chat who've taken time out of their busy day to join us tonight. We hope we got to all of your questions, and we appreciate you guys being here and along this journey with us. We appreciate Brian. We appreciate Claude. We appreciate Lee, Alan, always for being here. And folks, remember, the reason why we're doing this, Brian hit on something very strong that I want to keep reiterating, is I saw a need. There was a couple of reasons that Alan and I decided to do this podcast. One was, the tragedy that happened with my father. I didn't want to see anyone else have to grow up like me. And then the second thing was that we wanted to give back because we saw a very big gap and we saw a lot of negativity going on in the firearms community and industry. And we wanted to do something about that. And we wanted to connect good people and put good people together. And we wanted to put a very bright light on all the people who are doing good work, that want to work together, that want to uplift other people, who want, and their hearts are in this, and their soul and their mind are in it, and they want to give back. And hearing the stories from Lee and from Brian tonight just show us that message is getting through. And it's so humbling. I mean, it means the world. It makes all this worth it. It takes a lot of effort and time to do the show. I won't lie to you. For me to produce the show, it takes, usually 10 to 12 hours with all the footwork I got to do ahead of time, booking the guests, doing, a lot of the work. But I just want to tell you guys, it makes it all worth it, because that's what we need to hear. When Lee told us that he had somebody come from a couple of states a few months ago to take his class, that is why we're here. And we're just so happy that you guys are listening. We're so honored and blessed and feel overwhelmed with joy that we're able to give back. When you pass on from this earth, people are going to remember you not for what you had materialistically, but how you made them feel and what you did. And I'm just overwhelmed by hearing that feedback tonight from them. And I just want to thank all of you for your support, those who support us through Patreon, since YouTube won't monetize this anymore. We appreciate, we got a bunch of new people who supported us through Patreon. We have a lot more new numbers of people subscribing, and we just want to, it's just humbling and overwhelming. We just want to say thank you so much. And with that, I will shut up and pass the final thought to Claude.
My final thought is, it's better to stay out of trouble than to get out of trouble. And I'll just leave folks with that. If that's what you think about, stay out of trouble, don't get out of trouble.
Well said, and amen to that, Claude. Well, folks, in the words of our good friend and mentor, Len Givens, I do not carry a pistol so I can impose my will upon someone else. I carry a pistol so someone cannot impose their will upon me. Folks, please have a great night. Please take care of yourself. Please be safe, be good to others, remain vigilant. We will see you guys all next week. So God bless you. Have a good night, and thank you for being here with us.